Okay, thank you, Adriana. I really do appreciate you covering end of year one. That's the heavy lifting of today's training. Again, I am Nathaniel Holmes. I'll be presenting end of year two, course completion, CTE, work-based learning, and 1 year grads and completers. This new end of year two submission includes the same data that was previously submitted in end of year one, but with the addition of the 1 year grad and completers counts. All right, let's talk about the end of year two data that is collected. There's generally four data groups. There's course completion, work-based learning, career technical education, and the newly added 1 year grad and completer counts. This data will feed into Carl Perkins, the California School Dashboards in terms of the CCI, and also be shown on DataQuest. The required files are the student enrollment. First, you have to establish ownership to submit any of this data for your students. But of course, the 1 year grad and completer will also be submitted as part of your exits in the student enrollment file. The staff demographic file is required as well, but only to make sure you account for all of your teachers throughout the entire academic year. Remember, fall two focused on teachers that were active during census day. There may have been movement since, there may have been classes teacher movement before, so that you want to make sure that you update your demographic record. The course completion file, the CRSE, must be submitted again to account for the curriculum that your students receive throughout the entire academic year, in particular for every grading period. And then your student course completion will show the academic achievement and the completion of your students. Again, these need to mirror the records submitted for the course completion. The student career technical education, the SCTEE file, identifies all those students who were CTE completers this academic year, and then those work-based learning students, students that were engaged in work-based learning activities throughout the year in grades 9 through 12 will be submitted in the WBLR, or affectionately called the Wobbler. Okay, let's review the staff involved with the submission, right? Of course, site staff is essential for this, right? You have your program staff that will identify your SCT completers, your registrars, site administrators, identifying those students that were engaged in work-based learning activities, verifying the academic achievement of your students submitted in the student course section completion file. And then you have student support staff. You may have human resources or demographics. So end of year two requires a collaborative effort. It is never, if you haven't learned yet, CalPADS submission and certification is never a one-person job. All right, so the purpose of the primer is to get you ready for end of year two. Hopefully, if you are watching this recording, it's well in advance of the snapshot starting. And so there are pre-snapshot submission activities that you can engage in. Our most successful LEAs are always submitting data to CalPADS, always reviewing reports. And so we encourage everyone, as long as they have the bandwidth, to duplicate these practices. When we think about the files required, the SENR is an ongoing submission. This file should be submitted with the student enrollment or student movement transferring between school to school. That goes along with the other files for student information, like their demographics, their English language acquisition, their program file. But you should be submitting these records pretty much ongoing, at least on a weekly basis, maybe a few times a month, but it should not be a periodic submission. The staff demographic can be submitted now, although it's not required until the end of year, right? Not required until you're looking at the data. If you update your staff demographic, that's one less headache. If you have any errors updating your staff demographic, you can start that now. For most of you, this will be the last grading period of the academic year. Whether it's quarter four, semester two, trimester three, every staff that's assigned to a course, you can submit those records. Probably won't have any other movement that needs to be reported for your staff. The course is also typically thought of as a periodic submission. And while that is true, you can submit your course records now in their entirety once the staff are accounted for, because most likely, again, being in your final grading period, you have all the data in your student information system to complete that part of the submission. you have your teachers, you have your course content, you have your section IDs, your class IDs, all that data needed for the course can be submitted now. So those three files would almost be half of end of year 2 completed. Now the student course completion file, you can have a few different strategies in its submission. You can just submit what you have and see if there's any errors or data discrepancies that trigger and focus on resolving those so that your final submission goes smooth. You can submit this file by academic term. So your first semester might be completed. You can submit all those records. Half of that submission is done. If you have quarters, you could submit 3 quarters and you're in your 4th quarter. You can wait to submit that data. When you make the data set of your final submission smaller, so theoretically the errors will be less, and you've completed and practiced the submission. So if you do see errors, you've resolved them, you know how the validations work. It's just an easier submission. There's a couple ways to do that. And if you do choose to partition that submission by academic term, I want to bring your attention to the column on the far right. It says record operational keys. Every file that's a replacement file, we've identified that under processing method, is submitted and it completely replaces data based on the operational key. And so that's why the marking period code is so important for the student course section. It also allows you to submit those student course section files for the first 3 quarters of the first semester without having to be unwritten or without the chance of it being overwritten when you submit the 4th quarter or just the second semester, because the marking period code identifies those records as unique. All right, moving on to the SCTE file. This file, of course, identifies those students who are completers this year. We can't say this enough. In conjunction with the SCTE file, those students reported must also have a capstone course in their CRSE record of this academic year. So those go hand in hand, and we'll address that again a little bit later. And then last but not least, uh, the Wobbler, the work-based learning file. You can submit these records as a test. At this time, there's not a significant number of validations. This is usually not so hard to submit. Collecting the data might bring its own challenges, but submitting the file is typically pretty smooth. So when we think about course completion and the significance of the data collection, you have to remember these courses, typically identified by your state course code, provide data and information for the California School Dashboard, the CCI, the Career College Indicator. So you can see at the top all the college course fields, right? Those students that are prepared or approaching prepared will typically have been enrolled in one or more of these college courses. They've attended and have received college credit, or possibly were dual enrollment and received both. Those college credit courses could also be CTE courses if they've been identified with a non-instructional strategy, a non-instructional level code of 23 or 24. And then your leadership military science courses are identified by state course code as well, 9373 and 9374. One thing we want to note, CALPADS will validate the courses and provide the data so long as you report it and there are no validation errors, no data discrepancies. But when you are trying to identify students who have, or where students will be counted in the CCI, remember, they are going to look at the grades, right? So, if you identify a student as a completer, but their grade is not a C minus or above, that student won't count. We will still count them on the reports as a completer, but the CCI also considers their academic achievement of the students. All right, so here we have the California School Dashboard website, and we want to find resources. So under About, you see Resources, and then you see Dashboard Resources. All right, so now we're on the CDE web portal, and we found the Dashboard Resources, and we want technical information. And now you can see Handbook, connecting CALPADS to the dashboard. And here's the version of the handbook that's currently available, the 24-25 handbook. I've already downloaded the handbook, and with any Word document, I always trigger the heading search by Control F, almost like I'm going to execute a find. So I have the heading search. Okay, so here we have the CCI College Career Indicator. It tells us what reports to look at, what information is going to be on the college and career indicator. So college credit, military science, identifies reports 319, 320, 311, and 310. It tells you about the different measures. And as we scroll through here, it has screenshots of what a report would look like. Of course, this is fictional, but you can see it identifies the state course code 9200, college credit course, history, social science, non-standard instruction level code dual credit, has a count of students. So this is what it would look like in the report. It shows you the marking periods, right? And so then some of the information that's very important is you can see here under leadership military science, it says all three codes. So it's referencing these codes here. All three codes are used to determine if graduates completed the measure over the last 4 or 5 years. So this tells me that the 4 or 5 years, it's not just their graduating year. It's not just this year. So as you're using report 3.11, 3.10, 3.19, 3.20 to verify the count of students that you anticipate counting in your CCI, that's just a 1 year count. They're going to look back 3 or 4 years. A student may have taken leadership in military science before this year. They may be graduating and completing high school this year, but they may have taken these courses as sophomores and juniors. They may have completed pathways as sophomores and juniors. They still get credit. They're still going to be representing the CCI, but there will be a discrepancy between report 3.11 this year and what shows up in the CCI. You need to be able to understand that. And this document clearly illustrates that. So I would highly recommend uh, using this as a reference, right? If you have time to peruse it and read it for your pleasure, go ahead. But most of us are going to hit Control F, try to verify a particular area, whether it be the cohort, looking at 15.2, 3.10, if it's the CCI or student discipline. But this is helps you connect CalPADS to the dashboard. Okay, moving right along. We have a couple certification errors we want to highlight. For end of year 2, I would suggest that the SENR 0713E2 error, although it's just a warning, you do not want to disregard this error. Because we expect data for your students for every grading period, this error will trigger for every student, and it's just a warning. Initially, as you submit your student course section completion files, the errors will go down. One, the trick is not every student has been enrolled long enough to receive grades. We're looking at the entire academic year. If anyone came for 2 weeks or a month or 2 months, but didn't receive or didn't have official grades or wasn't there long enough to complete an official grading period, they have an enrollment record, but they won't have grades. That's why it's a warning. But you can't think that is going to be the case for every student or every student triggering this error. And so while depending on the size of your LEA, it may not be practical to verify every single warning, I would suggest looking at schools, comparing the number of these warnings to your enrollment for the year. If 30% of your enrollment are triggering this error and you're not a community-based school or a COE school, a high mobility school, it's probably an error, right? You probably should look into resubmitting those student course section completion records. Then on the next slide, this is my favorite error and Kyron's favorite error, the student course section completion 0139E2, missing course section record. This error has been around since its inception and of course data in CALPADS. It's a beast of an error. It can single-handedly derail your end of year two submission. So you want to make sure, especially since you're submitting records for the entire grading period, not just over census day. You want to make sure that your student course section completion records have the same academic term code, academic year, course section ID, and local course ID of courses that have been reported. So you really want to do your due diligence and submit those files early, like right now, your course and your student course section, to whittle down any of these errors. If you need to get assistance from the CALPADS support desk or your CSIS monitor, it's better to do that in April and May rather than up against the deadline in July or August. So if you see this error, it's going to tell you that you submitted student course section or student course completion records for students that do not have corresponding course records. It can be difficult to resolve. So I would encourage you all to submit those course completion files now. The CRSE and then the SESC. Okay, so one of the more common errors is the SETE 0698E1, formerly the CERT 123 for those who have been submitting data in CALPADS for quite some time. This error identifies those students who have SETE records. You've identified them as completers, yet they do not have a capstone course. And there's several different variations of this. They do not have a capstone course that aligns with their pathway. They don't have a capstone course reported at all. They don't have CTE courses reported at all. And so the valid code combinations document helps you identify the state course code, the courses that are in a pathway, the different pathways so that you can align those with your CTE offerings and your industry sectors, right? Those CTE pathway codes. There's 3 different tabs in that single document, and it can be burdensome going through the Excel spreadsheet. So I want to offer you all an alternative. All right, so we're at the CDE web portal, and we're on this CTEIG, the Career Technical Education Incentive Grant page, right? And most of this you don't need, right? But this is a very important document. It's buried at the bottom, CTE User Guide. But what does it say in the description? CALPADS CTE course definitions by sector and pathways. And it is a time saver. Here's the user guide. Again, I like to use Control F. I have all the headings and titles here, and I would think this is the best way to use the document, right? So you can see the industry sector titles here, and then each industry sector have the different pathways. So let's go to information technology or information communication technologies, right? Here's the industry sector, multiple pathways. So it tells you that there's 8100 can be used in multiple pathways as a introductory course. And then specifically, pathway code 170. This is the code in CALPADS. This is the title of the state pathway. Your title might be a little bit different, but it's information, support, and services. These are the state course codes that can be used in that pathway. These state course codes align that pathway. This is the capstone. So for your SETE completers for this industry sector, we expect to see 8112, and that's the only one. Some pathways have multiple capstone course codes that can be used. This one has a single capstone course code. Sometimes your problem might be that you have aligned your curriculum to the wrong pathway. So you can see agriculture has agriculture business, agriculture mechanics, agri-science, sustainable agriculture pathway, animal science. So you want to really look at the definition of your pathways, align them correctly, look at the description of the courses. These align with what's in the CALPADS code set, and make sure you have the right pathway so that your course content could match. And so you can see advanced agricultural mechanics is 7122. but 7132 is advanced agri-science, right? You may misreport your students and trigger an error just because you have the wrong pathway or the wrong capstone course. So I like the alignment. It shows you all three. It has the definitions, the title of the pathways. I think this is a great document and a good resource to use. And if not you, make sure that your CTE program staff is referencing this document if they are mapping your CTE courses for your students. So that document will help you resolve, identify what's triggering the SCTE 0698E1 error, but most importantly, if you appropriately align your pathways and your courses, you can avoid this error altogether. So again, we mentioned this earlier, but tracking your student work-based learning participation data is the most significant aspect of the work-based learning data collection. Identifying those students who are engaged in work-based learning activities. It's not a large file. It doesn't have a lot of validations, but making sure that the students who are engaged in work-based learning activities are receiving credit seems to be the greatest challenge. So you want to make sure that locally the work-based learning experiences are categorized. They're not just restricted to CTE, right? Identify opportunities and employers. You want to identify with your district who can provide work-based learning to your students, what employers provide internships, what courses can include an element of work-based learning. There's virtual simulated work-based learning as a WBLR type. So essentially any subject matter, any course that has work-based learning activities can be a program. Then you want to make sure that the hours and dates and the student performance are documented, in particular for those students who have internships, and then of course preserving their local records. So if your work-based learning is offered through special education or CTE, you want to make sure that those records are in your student information system. All right, so about this time of year, we answer a lot of questions about work-based learning and work experience. Does this count as work-based learning? Does that count as work-based learning? So one of the general rules of work-based learning is that there is an educational approach. The classroom environment is integrated with the work. The work is not just the student getting paid or getting experience with working. There's an academic learning process as well. Work experience, on the other hand, is a broad term for any paid or unpaid work. There's a specific structure aligned with curriculum and industry standards with work-based learning. Work experience is not necessarily structured, right? There's goals to work-based learning. You usually want to connect school experiences with real-life work activities. That's a purpose. It's designed in the curriculum. Work experience typically offers an opportunity for students to gain practical skills, explore different career paths, and develop employable skills. Again, the curriculum of the school is not necessarily tied to work experience. And then examples of work-based learning would be internships, apprenticeships, job shadowing, school-based enterprises. Similarly, work experience could also include internships, volunteer work, part-time jobs, community service. So there are a lot of similarities, right? They both include work, but the structure, the intent will be different. Let's look at the end of year 2 reports. So this slide just tells us the report relationships. And if you just finished watching end of year 1, part of the primer with Adriana, you can see that this slide is a lot smaller. There's not as many reports. Your green reports are your aggregate counts. These are the reports that you will certify. The red reports are the supporting reports. They provide the student level detail, the course level detail. So we're going to consider report 3.19 and think about how to use it. 3.19 and 3.20 provide you the count of completers or the student list, which shows you every completer by name and SSID that were counted. If you run this report prior to August or the end of July, you can identify those students who should be counted that were not. Remember that this report will show you all the students who were reported as completers this year. It's a great report to provide your CTE staff because they might say, well, we should have more people represented in the dashboard. And that's when you tell them, go look at the cohort report. This is just for this year. The dashboard will show you all the CTE completers that graduated from the cohort. It gets them engaged, it gets them questioning, or perhaps the data is not correct. Maybe they didn't give you all the CTE completers. Maybe they didn't identify. Maybe your SCTE extract was never submitted and you didn't even notice it. But you don't have this information if you're not reviewing the reports. You cannot act on this information if you're not reviewing the reports before the deadline, right? You want to review the reports prior to desperation time, right? So even if the data set is not complete, do it as a test. See how committed your CTE program staff is. You know, every student who's completed or will complete has not finished, right? Submit the report, see if they even identify that. All right, let's cover the suggested milestones for end of year 2. From now until the snapshots begin, we suggest that you complete the data population in your local student information system. Concurrently, beginning now as well, you can also submit those files to CALPADS. This gives you an opportunity to identify any data discrepancies and resolve them and reconcile data as needed. The month starting around July 4th to August 3rd, about a 30-day window in which you can resolve certification errors and data discrepancies and review your reports, updating and finalizing your end of year 1 submission as needed. You'll be in good standing if you have 0 errors by August 3rd. That will also give you about a week to share those reports and provide them to your stakeholders. Your stakeholders can then provide the reports back, their findings, their suggestions, and identify any discrepancies, and provide you about a week to make those changes because there will be no amendment window. So 8/11 to 8/17, you should be doing your final corrections, getting your final review on your reports so that you can certify by August 17th. That is the final deadline, no amendment window. Remember, the cohort pool is also going to be extracted on the 17th. The cohort is not certified. The data is taken from the ODS. So you want to make sure that all your summer graduates, if you have students graduating at the end of the graduation dropout cycle, if they're graduating by 8/15, those enrollment exits are updated to show that they have graduated.